Real quick. Okay, awesome. So, second brief recap. She is a Lehigh alum who worked with Dr. Sommer in his lab before going to UC Berkeley for a little bit of graduate school work and then heading off into the industry. Um, and I'll probably leave it there and then let her tell her story and we can ask questions. So give it up for Mary Kate Pasha.
Okay, thanks for the intro. My name is Mary Kate. As Daniel said, I'm a Lehigh alum. So my plan for this is just to really keep it informal. And this is an opportunity for you guys to ask me anything. I'm really an open book. You can ask me like any sorts of questions. So I have a couple like very random slides that I just threw together. They're mostly pictures. Um, they're not very exciting, but I'll go ahead and share them. Oh, it says I can't share my screen.
You should be able to now, I think.
Okay, let's see. Yep, that worked. Um, okay, can you guys see that? Is that a yes? Hopefully. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is my very early career timeline. So I graduated in 2021 from Lehigh. And then I went off to grad school at UC Berkeley. I started the PhD program. Most of you probably know that the PhD program is typically like 5 to 7 years. But I opted to only stay for one, and then I went off into the industry world. But I'll give you guys a little bit more context for my background, and then I'll go into that in a bit. Um, so at Lehigh, as he said, I worked in Ariel's group. I started, I think, my junior year. And really, before then, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I kind of got into physics because of the movie Interstellar. And so for a long time, I thought I wanted to do space stuff. So I was interested in like astrophysics, and then I thought maybe I'd be interested in GR. And so for astrophysics, I thought maybe that's too much coding. And for GR, that was a little bit too much math. And so I happily settled into Ariel's group where I was doing experimental atomic physics. And that was like really my first plunge into lab work. Unfortunately, COVID hit like a couple weeks or like maybe half a semester after I started. So then I had to do some remote work, and then some of my in lab work was socially distanced. But that was really fun. And so I got to start doing a little bit of electronic design. I remember like my very first project was shopping on DigiKey, which if you guys haven't been on that website before, the first time is very overwhelming, but it gets much easier. And then I was also able to do some optics and some like laser beam alignment and stuff like that, which was really cool. So everyone at Lehigh was kind of asking me like, okay, where are you applying to grad school? So without even really thinking about it, I submitted my grad school apps and ended up at UC Berkeley. Um, and so I joined Dan Stamperkern's group. He does ultra cold atomic physics, just like Ariel. I joined this really cool lab that does cavity quantum electrodynamics. We put single tweezers or single atoms into tweezer traps and image them and then would kind of move them around. And if I'm sure you guys have heard about like quantum computing, this was kind of like a quantum error correcting scheme. Um, and so this was really cool. And I was really gung ho when I got in and was very excited to start. So I think I graduated in May and I started doing research in like June, which was really cool and kind of gave me an opportunity to get acclimated into the lab before the stress of classes and everything else kind of hit. And so then the classes started in August. Berkeley also does a really mean thing where they make you take a set of 4 exams before you even start, which is very intimidating. And then kind of like the stress of grad school settled in a bit. And I'm sure, I guess, are all of you guys undergrads or are any of you grad students?
I'm a grad student.
Okay, nice. So I'm sure you know it's really hard. And there's a lot to balance. And I was really lucky because I joined a group that was really well funded. And so I got to be paid as a graduate student researcher right off the bat. But for most students, they're balancing classwork, um, research, and teaching while also trying to like meet new people, get acclimated to a new place. So it's a lot. And I worked in a basement, which I think for me was a little bit of a challenge. Like I love to go outside. And so I think it kind of took a little bit of a toll on my mental health of just like being inside all the time, working really long hours, um, kind of like definitely feeling that imposter syndrome of being surrounded by a group of like really, really bright students and motivated students, which I think some days that felt really exciting and really fun, and other days felt a little bit more challenging. And so once I finished my first semester, I was kind of thinking, I'm not sure if I really want to do 5 more years of this. And so I kind of started putting my feelers out to apply to jobs just to see what was out there. As I said before, like I didn't even think about applying to jobs out of undergrad. And so like I really just hadn't looked at all. And so I ended up finding a really cool company called Vector Atomic. And these are three of our like very general stock photos, but basically my company makes atomic clocks and quantum inertial sensors. And so they take like a big tabletop kind of thing like this or this, and we put it into a tiny box. And so that was really cool. And I ended up getting this job and it so far has been a really great fit. So I've been here for about 2 years now. And so I'm doing primarily electronics design, but I also get to do some research and development on the physics side. So it's kind of like that perfect like combination of being able to do similar stuff that I was doing in grad school, like being able to do research and really like build new and novel things while being outside of that grad school setting. And so this is just kind of like a cool picture of something that I made. So I do like PCB design. This is a dual laser driver and quad temperature controller board. Um, and so this kind of like gives you an idea of the stuff that I'm doing now. Um, okay, so that's kind of like my general overview and background. Do any of you have any questions yet? I have a couple more slides of like random things, but I'd love it if you guys had questions.
I did have one question about your process of looking for a job. Like, what
Mhm.
was that like? Did you find Vector Atomic immediately and know that that was a place for you, or how did you like delineate between jobs, and which ones you wanted, which ones you didn't?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started looking at jobs, I truly had no idea. And I live in the Bay Area, and so there's a ton of like really cool startups here. So I guess like the first thing I knew, I wanted to stay in the Bay Area, so that kind of limited my search a little bit. I was thinking like maybe a quantum computing company would be cool. Um, and there's like a lot of those here, so I had a couple interviews with places like that. Um, I knew I didn't want to work at a big company. I just, even still, am a little intimidated by that. I think that culture is like a little bit scary, and I think I was looking for something a little bit more, or like a little less stressful after, or like what from transitioning from grad school. So I kind of ruled those out. But I ended up getting a couple interviews at some cool places, and then it just came down to like location, vibe of the people that I talk to. Um, I think the people that you work with is really, really important. Um, it can impact like you work with these people a lot, and so you see them like at least 8 hours a day, and you interact with them constantly, and so you want to make sure that you end up with like a good group. So that was important to me. like benefits, salary, all of that stuff obviously is important. And then Vector Atomic kind of was perfect because I wasn't really ready to give up atomic physics yet. And so that was really the only company that I could find that was doing like true commercialization of like atomic physics products. Um, I think some of the quantum computing companies were a little bit more, um, or like a little, like they had fewer people, and so it felt like it was going to be similar to a grad school vibe of like working really, really long hours and doing a lot of lab work and not having much documentation and stuff like that. So Vector Atomic, we have, I think I was like the 35th person that was hired, and now we're up to 50. So it's kind of a nice size where there's enough people that people are like starting to document things, but there isn't like a very formal process like at big companies. So yeah, did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I'm also wondering, so as because you were planning while you were still in grad school, I wonder how you addressed it during like your applications and interviews. Were you just admitting the part that you were in grad school and you applied as kind of like fresh undergraduate alum, I'm about to say, or did you mention that you are not interested in grad school anymore?
Yeah, I just was really honest with them and said that I like grad school, I don't think was the right fit for me at this time. And I think everybody understood that pretty well because I also like I got great experience at UC Berkeley. Like working on that kind of experiment is like I definitely learned a lot of skills. So I think people didn't really see it as a negative. I also think so Vector Atomic is primarily like a lot of the people that work there are physics PhDs. And so they were all pretty sympathetic with me because they know like how challenging the program is. And so I think like nobody was judgmental of it at all. People were kind of like, oh yeah, I get it. Or like a lot of people that I work with have shared stories of like times that they had considered leaving. So I didn't really find it as a problem. I'm just, like everybody asked in the interviews, like, oh, why are you doing this? But nobody took it as really negative. They were just curious, I guess.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Oh, okay. You say you're more responsible for your, I guess, learning more about physics? Like, do you? Like, I know that you learned stuff on the job for Vector Atomic, but if you were interested in, I guess, like learning more about physics, that's just like individual, right? I guess, I don't know.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh. How much did you learn on the job at Vector Atomic?
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely a lot. So I shifted into more of like an electrical engineering role. And I have never taken an electrical engineering class in my life. And so like you learn a little bit in E&M, and you do like a little, like I did a little bit of circuit design, but nothing this complicated for sure. So that was a little bit stressful when I first started of like really I had totally switched fields. And the people, like the other electrical engineers at my company, are all like formally trained. I'm also like by far the youngest, and so like even more, I'm like a little bit of a newbie, like compared to everyone else. So yeah, but I'm really lucky. I have a great manager. Ariel, he actually reminds me a lot of you. Very supportive and like very smart and has like a lot of I guess like good wisdom to impart and like is very helpful to learn from. So I think that was like that has been really, really beneficial to me. And I feel like I'm really growing a lot and learning a lot too.
Cool. I know you're only, I think you said about 2 years into your position at Vector Atomic, but do you see yourself staying there for like a substantial amount longer, or you think you're gonna try to find a new job in like a couple of years? 'Cause I went to a conference in December and they were talking about finding jobs in industry and how like every couple of years or so, it's good if you want a pay raise to find another position. Is that something, I guess, that sounds like you would do, or do you think vector atomic is something you would stick with?
Yeah, so that's something that I think about a lot. I have a lot of friends who are kind of like playing that game of like switching jobs every couple of years. I think right now I am happy, and I'm happy staying here. I think we're kind of at a really cool point where like we just made our very first commercial sale. And so I think in the next couple of years, like we're gonna come up with some cool stuff and I guess like it feels like a good time to be at the company. Um, I also think because I like was one of the earliest people there, like I'm like pretty valuable. And so I think I have a little bit of leverage if I was worried about like needing a pay raise or something like that. Um, so I don't know. I guess my answer to your question is I don't know. It's something I think about. I probably at some point in the near future will submit some more applications just so I don't get like rusty on interviews and stuff like that, and just so I can like keep reminding myself of like other opportunities. But I think for now, I'm happy and it's been a good fit.
Okay, nice.
You had mentioned initially, like when you first started at Berkeley, that you felt kind of overwhelmed with the program and some imposter syndrome. So I just wanted to know, since you started at the program with, not as much knowledge, and then you switched fields to join a company and you didn't have much knowledge in that field, how did those first few months at Berkeley contrast with the first few months at Vector Atomic?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think I think the difference is so okay, both of them were challenging and both of them I definitely felt that kind of sense of imposter syndrome or like a sense of like not being smart enough or good enough for that for the role that I was trying to fill. But I think the difference is at Berkeley, and like in physics in general, especially in atomic physics, you kind of are supposed to be good at everything. Like you need to be good at math, so you need to pass your classes and you need to like run simulations and calculate like whatever magnetic field you need at a certain point to trap your atoms. Like there's that aspect. You have to be a mechanical engineer, so you have to like I don't know screw sizes and things like that. You have to do optics. You have to write code. You have to like there's so many things that you have to do. Whereas like in my role in industry, I think they do kind of a better job of divvying it up of like this is your task and like this is your like number one priority, I guess. So I think it's like a little bit less overwhelming when you're given like one thing to do and one thing to master versus like 100. Um, and especially like at Berkeley, you're working with people who have all different kinds of experience from like other groups. There were some people that had gone into industry before and so had industry experience coming in. So I think and also so I was lucky and like got placed in a lab right away, but a lot of people do rotations and so they'll try out different groups. And so I know a lot of people felt kind of like stressed out because they were fighting for positions with other people, which also like it's a little bit more competitive. Whereas like once they give you a job, like really in industry, they are invested in you succeeding, like they're paying you a salary. And so they want to like set you up for success. So I remember the first thing that I did at my job is they sent me to like a 3-day class to learn the software that I was going to be using for board design. And so it was like, and like they knew, like they were like, okay, you don't know how to do this. And so like we're going to give you all the tools for you to succeed. Whereas I think at Berkeley it was a little bit more like, okay, well, you have to kind of somehow learn all these things and like here are the people that you can ask for help. Um, so I don't know, sorry, I just really rambled. But I think like the main difference is Berkeley had a lot of things and like not very clear places to where to find answers. And then in industry, it's like a little bit more clear.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was curious about, you said that your company made the first commercial sale. I don't know what the balance of like what's confidential and what's not, so like you'll have to evaluate that. But like, are you allowed to say like who, what the sale was, or what the nature of it was, or who it was to? Just like, I'm curious.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about it. So we actually sold it to a physicist who, I don't actually even know his name, but I know he has a new theory of gravity or something. I've only heard like tidbits. I don't know all the info. But he basically wants a really precise clock to test his theory. And so
So it's
he
like for,
bought. Oh, sorry, what did you say?
I guess presumably this physicist is like the head of a research group. It's not like not like an eccentric guy with a garage. I think it's like a research group that's using it.
No, I think he is kind of, I think, well, okay. I think he is kind of an eccentric guy. And I think he's working with people. It's not like he's not a professor. He's not a university guy. But I think he's like hired some other physicists to help him with this. So I think it is kind of like I don't know, kind of a funny vibe.
Okay, see. Are
Um,
most
but
customer,
it's an atomic clock. So that's what the sale was, which is pretty cool.
yeah,
And then we've had some other like really cool products like this box. Okay, well the top box is what the clock looks like. And then the bottom box is a gyroscope that we actually sent out into space, um, which is pretty cool. And so yeah, I developed some of the electronics that are in there. And designing stuff for space is a real headache, but it's pretty fun.
so is there a circuit board that's like floating in space right now that you designed?
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Well, maybe. I don't know how long it's up there. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Like low orbit or?
Yeah, it's low Earth orbit.
So you talked a lot about how moving to industry from grad school was a good move for you. Were there any like downsides that were maybe unexpected going into industry from grad school or academia in general?
Yeah, so I think when I first made the decision, I had a lot of um like kind of questioning if I had made the right decision. So Berkeley's really awesome and they give you 5 years to change your mind. So I still have a couple years if I decide I want to go back to the program. So I think that made it feel a little bit safer that it wasn't like I was giving up everything. And I left the research group I was in on really good terms, and they kind of made it clear that I'd be welcome back if I chose to. So I think that kind of like helped me get over that aspect. But honestly, so far, there haven't really been any downsides. Um, I think I think the company that I'm at is like very unique and I think has made that transition a little bit easier because also like I said this before, a lot of the people at my company are PhD physicists, and so like really the vibe isn't all that different. It's really like kind of semi-organized chaos, and it's like a really fun environment, and so it actually doesn't feel all that different. But I think the biggest difference for me is the work-life balance aspect. I feel like I am able to like manage my mental health a lot better, which is great. And also like a lot of people I work with have young kids. And so like really nobody is working super long hours, or like you work long hours if your project has a big deadline and then the next week they give you pizza and they're like, oh, thanks for doing that. So that's been really great. So I don't know. There have definitely been times that I have like regretted it or like wished to be back at Berkeley and like back in like doing that kind of research. I also like I made a lot of friends in the program, and so I like hear about it a lot, which sometimes makes me miss it. But overall, I think it's been the right move, and there hasn't been any like big red flag that has made me want to jump back to the program. But this is also like my experience. And like I know a lot of people love grad school and like my friends that are all still in the program like wouldn't dream of leaving. So this is just like I don't want to freak you guys out and make you think that like grad school is horrible. Because it's not. It just wasn't for me.
So are you working on anything new? Any new products currently?
Um, so I guess like the big thing in industry is like size, weight, power, and cost. And so basically, as soon as we finish one thing, they're like, okay, great. Now can you make it smaller and cheaper and take less power? So just kind of iterations of the same stuff, but tinier form factors. So there's always something new. And also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, we're funded by government contracts. And so I think we have like 30 programs that we're all working on. And so luckily the electronics kind of is similar for some of them. So there's some crossover. But yeah, there's like always a ton to do. And I guess the new cool thing that there was a kickoff for it this week. I like have developed our commercial laser driver that we're using. And so now like the next step is to make that into like a single chip. So that's going to get into like ASIC design, which I've never done before. So that'll be kind of like a new exciting project to learn about.
Okay. Would you say that you're, I don't know about always, but like frequently learning new things on the job?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think it's also nice because I have the physics background. I get to do a lot of the integrating of the electronics with the physics team. And so like I get to do, so I guess I didn't really explain this. So with the board design that I do, I start like basically from the very beginning of like getting the specs, and then I make the schematic, and then I like put it into board form, like we do the layout, we call it, and then order it, and then get it in-house and test it, and then I also get to integrate it into the systems, which is pretty cool. Um, and so, yeah, I'm like constantly learning more about like both electronic stuff and physics stuff, because I get to have that like extra integration time with the physics team. And all the physicists at my company are super awesome and are always willing to answer my questions. So yeah, I'm like constantly learning, um, which is nice.
Who comes up with the names on the boxes? Why does the last one say pickles?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like I said, we're like government contracts, and so all of the names are the name of the contract, and they all are these like crazy acronym that our CEO comes up with. Um, so pickles, I don't actually even know what it stands for. That was kind of like a first generation clock before I started. Um, but yeah, I'm working on something called Icicle. Um, Picosec, Priceless, Magic, Cosmic. Like we have a lot of kind of fun acronyms. I think our CEO like really prides himself on coming up with them. So um, they're pretty fun. You guys have
So,
any questions? You can ask about like applying to grad school and stuff too. Because I didn't do that all that long ago, so I still remember some things or anything else.
I hope this question isn't too personal, but when I think of the Bay Area, yeah, obviously there's all these startups, but I also think of a high cost of living. And a lot of these companies are in that area, so I was just wondering, like, how do your expenses look?
Yeah, so I'll say as a grad student, so I'm not sure how many of you know this, but the PhD programs are funded. And so basically the department will pay for your tuition and then also give you a salary on top of that. So with a grad student salary, living in the Bay Area is tough. It's especially like if you want to live near campus, it's definitely like a little bit of a challenge. I think it's like it's livable for sure, but you're not really getting too much in your savings. And so that was like another kind of pro of switching to industry. It was like a pretty substantial pay bump, which makes living in the Bay Area a little bit less stressful. So yeah, I'll say like most of the companies, I guess like I don't really know about other companies, but I think that my company pays pretty fairly for the area. Um, but I don't know. I've been okay.
So when was like your latest admission decision for grad school?
So the very last school I heard from was Berkeley. And I had like basically rolled it out and had decided that I was going somewhere else, and then was very surprised when I got the decision. I remember I was actually in one of Ariel's Zoom classes when I found out. And I want to say it was like uh sometime in March, like late March. Which you have to decide by April or May. I can't remember.
I think it's April something.
Okay. Yeah, I think Berkeley just had their, I guess I think they just had their like admitted students day last week. So kind of like around this time. I'm not sure. But definitely there were some that, yeah, like Berkeley, I was waiting a while for. Um,
April.
what did you say?
Like, did all of your decisions come in like mid-March, end of March, or like early April, or?
I think I got into my first school in December, and then they kind of just kept trickling in. Um, I also heard so one, I guess I'm not sure how many of you are like have already applied to grad school or if there's still people that are going to apply. Um, but I would say like number one piece of advice if you are applying is to reach out to faculty members and like people that you want to do research with and try to even like schedule a meeting and talk to them before. Because I think if you make that personal connection with someone, then they're like invested in you getting into the school, and so then they have some pull. So I even heard like from some professors who I had talked to like when I had been applying, I heard like early from them, like, oh, you haven't gotten your letter yet, but like I wanted to let you know that you're in. So I don't know. It's kind of all over the place. It felt very different than undergrad decisions. But if you haven't heard from a school, don't stress too much. I'm sure that they'll get back to you. And don't go on grad cafe or whatever that website is. Don't do it because people will just stress you out.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
What was the process for applying to grad schools for you? Because you said like you didn't really know if you wanted to, you were just applying.
Yeah, so I think well, I think I had decided that I wanted to, but it was more of a it wasn't like an internal decision. It was kind of like, oh, people are expecting me to do this, so I guess I'm just going to do this. And like I'm lazy to see what else is out there, so I'll just go with it. It was kind of like an inertia thing. Um, but yeah, I think it was stressful. I so I'm originally from California and then obviously went to Lehigh. I didn't really like winter so much. It was a little too cold for me. So that kind of made my like picking schools easier. So I picked only schools on the West Coast. Um, and then yeah, I remember being really stressed. Like writing statement of purpose was hard. Luckily, I don't know if the GRE is back, but I didn't have to take that, which was nice because it was COVID. Um, but yeah, it's stressful and it's hard to make a decision once you have your options. Um, but I mean, I didn't even get to go and see the schools either, which I think usually they like fly you out and like make you feel special. Which I didn't get to do that, so that was kind of sad. But yeah,
Why
it's a
not?
stressful time.
Why didn't you get to go see the schools?
because it was COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, actually one of the schools that I was considering was in Germany. Um, and I like was all set to go there. Um, and then I kind of like heard back from my other schools. And then at that point, like in 2021, I'm sure you guys remember like COVID, like everything was super uncertain as to what was going on. And so I was really afraid to move to Europe and I thought I was going to get stuck there and not be able to see anyone. So I ended up staying in the US, but that's also an option if you want to look at other countries because they have a lot of cool physics other places too.
Wait, did you apply to PhD in Germany? Because I thought that like a lot of European institutions usually require masters before.
So I applied directly as a PhD student and somehow got in. I don't know. I think the way that they do it in Europe is a little bit different. Like in the US, it's very much like you apply to the school, you get into the school, and then you join a research group. But at least like from my understanding in Europe, it's more like you make a connection with someone and then they hire you. And so like I made a really great connection with one of the physicists. It was a school called Heidelberg University in Germany. Um, and so he kind of said like, well, you don't have your master's yet, but that's okay. You can take classes if like you feel like you need to. Um, it seemed a little bit more chill. Maybe I would have liked that better. I don't know. Because balancing classes with everything is really hard, especially since like the older grad students will tell you that the classes aren't important. Like that was really hard for me. They'd be like, oh, don't go to lecture, you don't need it. And I didn't want them to think that I needed it, so I didn't, and then really I should have gone. So that made the exams really hard. But I don't know. I think if I would go back and do it again, I would handle things differently at Berkeley for sure. Any other questions?
I don't know if we do. I'm
You
trying to
guys
be-
also, if you send out my email, if you guys think of things later, or if you're interested in this company also, and you want somebody to like bump your application, I'm happy to talk to you guys and do that for you too.
Okay, awesome.
Does the vector atomic has any quantum computing related projects?
No, so I think like our big like motto or whatever is like quantum technology now. And so I think like there's a ton of companies that are trying to do quantum computing and it's been like a little bit slow going. And I think the government has stopped funding it as much. And so really we're trying to like stay out of that realm. Maybe someday they'll go into that. But right now we're just doing atomic clocks and quantum sensors.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
I think I have maybe one last question. Uh, I'm not sure how much you would know, but I know that like going into certain industries can maybe somewhat restrict your future possibilities, like if it's super specialized or niche. Um, would you say vector atomic is maybe more generalized and like can apply to other industries as well, or where do you think you'd classify that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that has been really nice at Vector Atomic is I'm like doing a lot of different things. So like primarily my job title is electrical engineer. And so like a lot of my time is spent doing electronics development, which I think is applicable to like a ton of different industries. Because I think a lot of things need electronics. And so that's kind of, there's a big need for that. But then I've also gotten to do some like laser design, some like optic stuff. And so I've kind of gotten to figure out like what things I like and what things I don't like. And so I think I'm actually finding that like I really love doing the testing. I like the design too, but I think the testing is like like I have more fun there. And so I think like that's good to know so that when I'm looking for my next job, I can look for something that's going to be more of like a testing role. Um, so yeah, I think that like we have a lot of things going on. And the management, like the upper management people are really good about like respecting what people's interests are. And so like basically I just have to go and have a conversation with someone and say like, hey, I'm interested in working on this project. And then they'll say like, okay, great. And then like the next day I'll start working on that project. So it's kind of like a build your own adventure kind of thing. So I'm figuring out what I want to do moving forward, I guess.
Okay, nice.
But it's definitely like a little bit of a niche field because there's not a lot of companies doing this. So like very specific industry knowledge is a little niche, but I think the skills are broad.
Maybe I could ask a question.
Yeah.
So you gave some good advice about like grad school applications and reaching out to professors. Is there any kind of analogous advice you would give for industry job searching? Because I get the sense that people send off like 100 applications and it's kind of just like you're throwing them into the void and maybe you hear back from a small fraction of them. Was that your experience, or was there also a way of like making more of a personal connection with like recruiters or other people from the companies you were applying to?
I think that I'm trying to remember what I even did. I think I did just like send off my resume to a bunch of places, but I think because I was applying to like smaller R&D companies, I think like those people are a little bit like are more likely to get back to you. I also think because I had kind of a weird background and the companies that I was applying to like kind of appreciated that. I think that helped a lot. Um, but I think if you just like you have to write like a little like most of them you have to write a little paragraph about like why are you applying here? So just like do your research and make sure that you like write about specific things. And like give like specific examples as best you can of like what you would bring to the company and like what the company like what you find interesting about the company. I think if you can just make it like as specific as possible, then people will say like, oh wow, you like did your research and you're really interested. Because I mean, at the end of the day, people don't want to waste their time interviewing people who like aren't going to take the job. So I think like if you can seem interested, that's like the best thing to do. Also, like in writing a statement of purpose, like switching back to grad school, like if you write about like specific research projects with like specific professors you'd want to work with, like I think that's helpful. Because it's like you kind of can put it in their mind of like here is where I would be, and then they can kind of picture you being a part of like a smaller group. It makes it more concrete.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, then we should thank Mary Kate for coming to talk to us.
Thanks for all the questions. Those were great.
Yeah, thanks for having the time to come talk to us. I'm sure, I know I really liked it. I'm sure others did. I'm sure the people who will watch the recording will get a lot out of it. So I appreciate it. And I will send out your email to people who may be interested in vector atomic. So maybe be on the lookout for emails from
Okay.
random Lehigh students.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.